join us. We may or may not be able to get to a lot of questions because we've got a vote scheduled for 12 o'clock, so we'll just see how it goes. I just want to get right to this. I said I absolutely wish we didn't have to be here today. We've gathered because we, each of us, deeply care about minority-serving institutions of higher education in this country. And the financial uncertainty that they're facing because the Senate has failed to act to renew some $255 million in expired annual federal funding that they've been able to count on for over a decade. So I want to put that into perspective. That funding accounts for nearly half of all federal funding for historically black colleges and universities. My bill, the Future Act, would renew this funding for an additional 2 years and give the Senate time to find a permanent fix. It is a bipartisan bill. It is a bicameral bill. It has already passed the House of Representatives unanimously. It's a paid-for bill. There has been some talk that the Senate bill has some budget gimmick that is not flexible. The fact of the matter is that has been corrected. This can pass without any legal or procedural hurdles. It has passed unanimously in the House to show you the bipartisan nature of this. Every day that passes without a renewal, these schools are one day closer to having to make very tough decisions that could do permanent damage, including layoff staff, letting contracts expire, winding down programs that serve students in STEM and other fields. I know that funding is available through next September, but that misses the point. People have to plan now. They have to start looking now to plan for their enrollment and their courses next fall. They have to know that this funding is in place right now. It's because even though they have funding through this school year, the budget planning goes year-round. And that's why it's so important to get this done. They simply cannot wait until Congress negotiates a permanent fix. And by the way, what we're trying to do now is not inconsistent with trying to do a permanent fix. Everybody up here and everyone in the Senate that I've talked to wants a permanent fix. But sometimes you have to go a step at a time, especially in a Senate in which we don't know whether anything else will come to the floor or not during this Congress. Many of these institutions face serious financial headwinds with fewer resources to draw from, significantly smaller endowments, and more extensive capital project needs. The point of this is that there is no safety net. For institutions that are leaders in educating students of color, lifting up generations of underserved communities, this is just unacceptable. We are working hard to get this done, to make sure it happens now, as soon as possible. These institutions don't just create jobs. They don't just support their local economy. They bring untold value and pride to their communities that they have long served. They deserve to be able to continue to fulfill their mission and serve their students. They deserve to vote on the Future Act now. So with that, I'm going to turn it over first to my colleague, Senator Schumer. Then we'll hear from key senators as they come in, and then the other stakeholders we have. Senator?
Well, thank you. First, let me thank Doug Jones. He has been our leader on this issue because of his understanding of HBCUs and all the other colleges that are affected, because he cares so passionately about these and sees what they're able to do in his state of Alabama. But we all care about this. The great education reformer Horace Mann once said, quote, "Education beyond all other devices of human origin is the great equalizer, the balance wheel of the social machinery." What minority-serving institutions have been able to do is to make education that great equalizer, accessible to so many Americans for whom it might not otherwise be. These institutions are ladders up. So many people living in poorer areas, in rural areas, don't have many ladders. This is one of them. And that's what America's all about, to provide ladders up. You're a hardworking young person. How do you get from here to there? Well, these colleges have been one of the best ways, and let me give you some statistics. HBCUs, for instance, make up 3% of our colleges and universities. They produce 27% of African American students with bachelor degrees in STEM, 80% of African American judges, 40% of African American engineers, 50% of African American lawyers, 40% of my African American colleagues here in the Congress attended HBCUs. And it's the same in the tribal colleges and universities. They serve 130,000 American Indians and Alaska Natives. They're probably the most underserved group in America when it comes to higher education. They are not only vital to tribal nation building and native language preservation, they're a great investment. For every $1 investment, $5.20 return. And Hispanic serving institutions, these are the fastest growing of our minority serving institutions. They've grown by 40% since 2009. That's a huge leap up. And they help the Latino community. They enroll 66% of all Hispanic undergraduates, but account for 15% of nonprofit colleges. So again, these ladders up. You're a poor person living in a rural region, particularly in the South and the West, although it certainly affects all of our states. You're on tribal land. You're in a community where usual access for the majority of citizens isn't available. They don't come recruit. They don't give scholarships. They don't do what's needed. These minority-owned colleges are the salvation, not just of the communities they serve, but of America, of making us more equal, of making us fairer, of making us just. And there's one thing that really ticks me off. How dare a senator, any senator, hold these young people who are awaiting these ladders hostage for some other political goal? How dare. If this bill were put on the floor, Doug's bill, that we're all supportive of, it would pass. And it's already passed the House. And even President Trump wouldn't dare veto it. Someone's holding it hostage. It's not holding a bill hostage. It's holding millions of young Americans who aspire and have hope and have dreams hostage. They ought to stop right now and bring this bill to the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Leader. Senator
you.
Murray?
And I apologize.
All right. Thank you, Senator Schumer. And I really want to thank Senator Jones. And as you can see, a number of senators who are here supporting this and advocating, everyone really appreciate it. HBCUs, tribal colleges, and MSIs, or minority serving institutions, are an essential part of our higher education system. These institutions serve about 6 million undergraduate students, a large majority of whom are students of color. Now, as you heard, funding for MSIs lapsed 50 days ago, and universities across this country are feeling the impact of this each and every day now. If we do not restore this funding before the end of this year, these colleges and universities will likely face a $255 million shortfall. To be clear, many HBCUs and MSIs are under-resourced. They do not have the flexibility to operate in the red. For those institutions, that means eliminating jobs, it means cutting programs, and reducing support services for their students. And to be clear, these risks will become more real and more urgent, not because the House hasn't acted, it has. Not because there isn't bipartisan support, there is a lot of it. We just need this bill to come up for a vote in the Senate so we can send it to the President's desk. This should be simple. We should pass the Future Act now, and then we can get back to the critical work of passing a comprehensive higher education bill that addresses affordability and accessibility and accountability and campus safety, and includes a permanent funding solution for these minority-serving institutions. I think every single senator would say they care about ensuring our students are prepared to succeed and compete in today's economy, and that exposing millions of students in hundreds of classes to massive uncertainty just out of inaction or political gamesmanship is no way to govern. I think so, and I think everyone here today agrees. So we are here to make the case. We're going to keep making the case and keep pushing our colleagues to listen. There are nearly 6 million students nationwide and institutions of truly invaluable historic significance to our country waiting for Congress, waiting for the Senate to do the right thing, and we should not delay any longer. This is too critical. So again, thank you, Senator Jones, for leading this effort. Thank you to all of our colleagues and everyone here who's helping us with this. And I turn it over to Senator Cardin.
Let me first thank Senator Jones for his incredible leadership on the Future Act. He's been our champion, recognizing how important this is, not just to his state, but to our nation. I also want to thank my colleagues that are here. This is, as Senator Murray said, a pretty simple situation. On October 1, the mandatory funding for historically black colleges and universities and minority-serving institutions expired. It is not controversial to make sure that funding continues. Democrats and Republicans agree that that needs to be done. So there's a simple way to make sure that funding continues, and that is to pass the Future Act that Senator Jones has brought forward. That's what we're here about. Yes, we need to reauthorize the Higher Education Act and deal with all the components of it, and it has not been done. And we're not going to get that done in the next week or two or month or two. It's going to take a little bit longer time to reconcile the differences in the Senate and the differences between the Senate and the House, and to make sure we can get a bill that's signed by the President. So that's going to take time, and that's understandable. We recognize that. We do want to see the permanent funding for the historic black colleges, universities, and minority-serving institutions, and make sure that continues. But that will come when we get through the final bill. In the meantime, as Senator Schumer said, don't hold these institutions hostage. And that's exactly what the Republicans are doing by objecting to passing the Future Act. What does it mean? It means that funding decisions such as staffing or improvements on campus or programs that require the predictability of knowing the funding is there cannot be done during this period of time. And that's holding back the opportunities of institutions that historically have been held back with their populations that they serve. That's unacceptable. And that's why we're here in such numbers to say there's a simple way. I have one other pleasant task, if I might, and that is President Breaux is here, who's the president of Bowie State University. Senator Van Hollen and I brag about 4 HBCUs that are in our state. They all do incredible service in our community. And President Breaux will speak later on behalf of all the HBCUs. I just want you to know, I was on campus just a few days ago, and I've seen firsthand the students that benefit from the services of her leadership on campus, providing opportunities so that they can achieve the American dream, but also they can help our country get the full value of every person here in America. One other thing, I was there to deal with business innovation, which is housed at Bowie State University, because President Breaux recognizes that HBCUs can be the mechanism to deal with the wealth disparity in America by creating entrepreneurship in minority communities. It's been her leadership and leadership that we see throughout our nation in HBCUs. That is why we're fighting to make sure they get the funding that they need. At this time, I'm going to yield to my colleague from Virginia, Senator Warner.
Well, thank you, Ben. Thank you for that. And let me add my voice to the others in terms of saluting Senator Jones from Alabama for taking the lead in this effort. It is time for us to pass the Future Act. These institutions, minority-serving institutions, have been underfunded for decades. This issue is personal to me. Before I was governor, I had the opportunity to serve on the board of Virginia Union. And a little bit later, we're going to hear from Jalen, a student at Union. I know the quality of students that come out of our HBCUs. I was proud to start in the mid-1990s an initiative called the Virginia High Tech Partnership that brought students from all 5 of our HBCUs and placed them in internships in tech firms across Virginia. In fact, our effort for 20 years placed more students just out of Virginia than the whole combined UNCF effort. So I know firsthand the quality of students that come out of the HBCUs. We've got 5 HBCUs in Virginia. They need this support. In Virginia, this failure to reauthorize this funding is costing these institutions combined about $4 million. That $4 million goes into services that can't be delivered. It may cut back on course offerings. It is inappropriate and wrong that this funding is being held hostage because, as other senators have mentioned, if this bill came to the floor of the Senate, it would pass overwhelmingly. It could be resolved with the House, and the President would sign it. So let's move forward. Let's not hold these universities hostage. They do a lot of great work. Again, I know Jalen's going to be making her comments in a few moments. We need to do more than say we support HBCUs and other minority-serving institutions. We need to give them the funding they deserve, and that will take place when we pass the Future Act. On that note, I'm going to turn it over to another colleague from Maryland. So I guess I was since we've got more HBCUs in Virginia than Maryland, I was the intermezzo between Cardin and Van Hollen, and I'm going to turn it over to Senator Van Hollen. And I also want to, again, give a shout out to Senator Jones, who not only is the leader on this legislation, but also has to stand here and listen to all his colleagues speak. So with that, let me turn it over to Senator Van Hollen. And Doug, thanks.
I'll try and make that short for you, Doug. First of all, I want to start where Senator Warner left off, which is thanking Senator Jones for his leadership on this. He's been absolutely tenacious, so thank you, Doug. Senator Cardin introduced Dr. Breaux, and she's going to speak momentarily. I just want to thank her for incredible leadership at Bowie State, which is one of 4 terrific HBCUs in the state of Maryland. Bottom line here is this should not be controversial. This is about extending the mandatory funding for minority-serving institutions past the House of Representatives unanimously. I'm absolutely confident if we put this on the Senate floor for a vote today, it would pass overwhelmingly. And so we have a simple question. Why are you holding it up? And we really haven't gotten a good answer. Like Senator Jones, I was on the floor of the Senate just about a week ago asking for unanimous consent to bring this bill up. There was an objection raised by somebody on the other side, and the reasons given were very fuzzy. But the bottom line is the best person and best people and best institutions to answer the question about whether or not this is causing harm and why it's important to do it right now are the representatives from minority-serving institutions themselves. No senator should be substituting his or her judgment about the negative impact this is having right now. And that's why it's great to have Dr. Breaux and representatives from other minority-serving institutions to be here today to point out that, yes, they're experiencing real harm. And I think that's why we're gathered here today, to hear from them directly with the support of our colleagues. So I want to thank everybody for working to pass the Future Act. No excuse. We should pass it now.
Senator Menendez.
Well, thank you. Let me also join in the chorus of voices of the work that Senator Jones has done here. Just as an insight, there's those in the Senate who will say, I'm with you, which means they're going to vote with you, who say they're going to support you, and that's good, better than the other alternative, obviously. And then there are those who put their political capital on the line to make something happen. Doug Jones has been putting his political capital on the line to make the Futures Act a reality. He has in our caucus, with our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, on the Senate floor, he has been putting his personal political capital that he has accrued here to try to have this singular legislative success on behalf of millions of students across our country. So I appreciate what you're doing, Doug. And let me just share one insight. As someone who grew up poor in a tenement in New Jersey, first in my family to go to college. I went to a college called St. Peter's College. It is today a minority-serving institution. The designation did not exist at the time, but it served the same purpose. For me and so many others, for which generationally were the first in their families to go to college, that institution today, as it did then, opened the doors of opportunity. That if you told me growing up poor in a tenement in New Jersey, the first in my family to go to college, that I could rise to be one of 100 United States senators in a country of 320 million people, I would have said that probably won't happen in my life. But it is the education that I got at St. Peter's College, at that minority-serving institution, that began to unlock that door for me to be able to realize my hopes, my dreams, my aspirations. That's why it's called the Future Act, because it is about the hopes and dreams and aspirations of millions of our fellow citizens of color who ultimately need to be able to fulfill their hopes and dreams and aspirations just as I did mine. This bill passed overwhelmingly in the House of Representatives, overwhelmingly. There is no reason to have it stalled in the United States Senate. And hopefully we raise our voices. Adlai Stevenson once said, "When I get the heat at home, I see the light in Washington." We need to create a little heat across the country so people will see the light in Washington and we can finally have success. Thank you, Senator Jones, for your work.
Thank you, Bob. John?
First of all, I want to thank everybody for being here. I very much appreciate it. The fact of the matter is that there's one reason why this bill hasn't been dealt with on the Senate floor, and that reason is Senator Mitch McConnell. Doug Jones, who's one of the most decent people I've ever served with, has brought forth a bill that's critically important. I'm going to approach it from a Native American standpoint. Montana, we have 7 tribal colleges, the most of any state in the nation. They're on each one of the 7 reservations that are in Montana. Unemployment on those reservations go from 50% to 60% to 70% to 80%. And if you want to break the cycle of poverty in this country, whether it's an Indian reservation or anywhere else, it's through education. And that's why this bill is so critically important. I could have quotes from every tribal college in Montana in front of you. All of them will tell you things like, we're underfunded now. We need the predictability if we're going to give opportunity for the next generations of leaders. I would go a step further. They need the funding now if they're going to educate folks to be able to get their people out of poverty. Doug, I want to thank you for what you've done here. I think it's great. We've got to get Senator McConnell to get off of this thing about not bringing anything to the floor except bad judges to vote on. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I want to thank all my colleagues that came here today. We've got several other speakers that we're going to bring up one at a time, and I know we've got votes pending, so Senator Murray and I may have to slip out in a moment, but they will still be here one at a time. So with that, I'd like to bring on Dr. Breaux from Bowie State.
Thank you very much, and good morning. And I'd like to add my thanks and appreciation to all that's been said here today on behalf of Bowie State University, but also on behalf of all of our HBCUs and minority-serving institutions, thanking the leadership of Senator Doug Jones for all that you are doing to support this bill and to get this bill passed. I am here as the very proud 10th president of Bowie State University, but also I'm here representing our fine institutions across this country that are leading the way to serve millions of students and ensuring that our institutions remain as the economic engines of our communities. This bill is beyond just any one region. It's about the country and producing the talent that we need to fulfill the workforce needs for today and for the 21st century. It's about preparing our leaders, our future leaders, to go out into the communities and to serve in the workplace and in our communities and enriching our very country. So it's more than just about the we of each individual institution. Today, as the president of Bowie State University, I stand before you advocating for my colleagues across this country that are trying to do the business at hand in producing our leaders for tomorrow. And shortly you'll hear from one of those students. But today you need to know that our universities are striving, and we are at Bowie State University are racing to excellence. And you heard Senator Ben Cardin speak speak a bit about that. We are developing not just individuals to go into disciplines, but to spearhead new technologies, to do the research that's necessary to stay at the forefront in helping our country stay at the forefront of education globally. So today I want to advocate for the passing of this bipartisan bill. It is unfathomable to think about our young men and women who are on our campuses aspiring to achieve their goals and contribute back to our communities and not supporting them in that endeavor. This is an upward mobility, a way for our families to be lifted up throughout our our social economic pathways. So we are creating pathways to success for students for today and for tomorrow. Our universities need these funds to help strengthen the quality of our academic programs. Our universities need these funds to build capacity at our institutions. Some of our institutions are striving to create more opportunities for more students to come, including Bowie State University, but we need that support. Imagine trying to conduct a business, lead a business, without knowing what budget you have. How can you plan to have the learning environments for the students, the research labs, and all that we know our workplaces are telling us we need to provide for our students to learn and to thrive when they graduate from our institutions? Our universities need these funds to enhance fiscal stability, and our HBCUs and other MSIs as we prepare the 21st century learners. Our workplaces, companies, government agencies, non-for-profit, for-profit, our communities, and the economic engines across the country need this support, and we need this bill to pass now. I want to also thank our Senators Van Hollen and Ben Cardin in the state of Maryland who have supported our HBCUs, and thank you to all the senators who spoke today and all of those who are supporting this bill in a bipartisan way. The importance of passing the Future Act cannot be overstated. We need it to pass. Today, HBCUs across the country enroll, and you heard some of those statistics from Leader Schumer. 10% of all African American undergraduates produce 17% of all African American college graduates with bachelor's degrees, and graduate 21% of all African Americans with bachelor's in STEM fields. Title III funds are the lifeline in expanding STEM research opportunities, reinvesting in aging facilities and our infrastructures, upgrading classrooms with smart technologies, and building student support systems with staff who are laser focused on the retention, not just enrollment, but this is about retaining and graduating students in a timely fashion. Again, I urge the Senate to pass this bipartisan Future Act to continue the educational strides taking place at our HBCUs across this country and among our MSIs. Thank you so much for your time and your support. Thank you so very much for what you are doing on behalf of our students across the campuses of each of our HBCUs and our minority-serving institutions. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Dr. Pro, for being here. I'm going to go ahead and step out. I know, not sure when. Okay, we're going to step out. We have several other speakers. Please stay. Their messages are so very important. So please stay. I apologize that Patty and I have to step out, but the messages from those people on the ground are so much more important than what you've heard so far with regard to the senators. It's the messages from the people that need these funds. So thank you all for coming, and we'll go next to Ms. Hodges. Thank you.
Greetings. I am Jalen Hodges, a junior biology major at Virginia Union University, also known as VUU, where I currently have a 4.0 GPA and serve as the university's first ever elected student representative to the Board of Trustees. I am also the direct beneficiary of Title III funding, and in particular, mandatory funding found in the Title III, Part F of the Higher Education Act of 1965. When I arrived at my prestigious HBCU in fall of 2017, I entered the gateway into my future. During my first year, I conducted research in our neuroscience and chemistry laboratories, where I learned technical and analytical skills that are essential to my long-term academic and professional goals. In the classroom, I received my education with smartboard technology, allowing me and many of my colleagues to learn more efficiently. Mandatory funding found in the Title III, Part F, is the reason why I have been able to have access to many of these resources. With continued mandatory funding, the university will be able to provide student access to technological resources. With continued mandatory funding, students will receive continued support for their participation in our workforce development program, which allows students to gain experience in fields related to their interests, such as STEM education and/or future careers, while paying off their tuition. With continued mandatory funding, updates to our historic buildings would remain a priority. With continued mandatory funding, students and faculty would be afforded access to ever-changing equipment and laboratories that are consistent with industry standards. With continued mandatory funding, I would maintain the encouragement and support of many of my faculty and staff, as a percentage of these funds help to pay their salaries. It's because of VUU that I am a better version of myself, one who is confident and assured that the resources that have been afforded to me have prepared me for my graduate studies in medicine. Mandatory funding in Title III, Part F has provided critical resources for HBCUs across the country. This funding goes to strengthening and expanding the technological infrastructure, bolstering teaching, learning, and research endeavors, as well as ensuring vital improvements and upgrades for the university's physical plant. Without this mandatory funding, VUU would not be able to achieve these things. It would not be able to continue to provide certain student support services. On behalf of the thousands of students who attend HBCUs, and VUU, who is recently identified by the Council of Independent Colleges as one of the top 10 producers of African Americans with a bachelorate degree who received a PhD in the biological sciences and a 155-year history of providing a bridge to intellectual freedom, Title III Part F funding has been an essential component to our growth and the worthy investment in the next generation of global leaders. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Harry Williams, and I serve as the president and CEO of the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, an organization that is designed in the whole mission and focus on supporting the 47 publicly supported historically black colleges and universities in this country, and predominantly black colleges and universities in this country. We have more than 300,000 students attending our HBCUs, and the time is now. Sense of urgency to get this done. We heard the senator said it's been 50 days when this bill expired in September 30th, and no action. I was very disappointed when I heard from the Senate that they didn't bring this to the floor. It was very disappointing, taking and looking into the fact that it's a bipartisan bill that passed the House of Representatives. And we're here today pleading with the members of the Senate to bring this bill to the floor. Pleading. I've talked to presidents. Presidents are saying that they are having serious conversations right now with their members, telling people they're going to be laid off. This is an economic bill. This impacts the community. We're approaching Christmas season, and we know how important it is to budget and manage our budget, and to know that we're going to have resources coming in. We have faculty, we have students right now attending our campuses, and they are making plans to try to find something else, to pack up their families, to move somewhere else. It's important. This is very, very important for our schools. Senate, please act today. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Leslie Baskerville, President and CEO of the National Association for Equal Opportunity in Higher Education, NAFIO, which is the nation's only membership and advocacy association for all 106 historically black colleges and universities, 50 predominantly black institutions located in 22 states, the District of Columbia, Virgin Islands, and Brazil. I'm also privileged to serve in the capacity as chair of the Alliance for Equity in Higher Education, a 20-year alliance between the umbrella organizations for all of the HBCUs and PBIs, all of the Hispanic serving institutions, all of the tribal colleges, and all of the Asian Pacific Islander institutions. We represent 6 million students combined. We represent 24% of all American colleges and universities. And these institutions are all underfunded relative to their missions and their outcomes, but they're punching above their weight in terms of their graduation of our students. If you look just at the HBCUs, they're 4% of American colleges and universities, and you heard some of the data, but particularly important for the budget's only mandatory funding for HBCUs and other minority-serving institutions is that they are graduating 42% of blacks in the sciences, technology, engineering, mathematics, 60% in health professions. They're punching above the weight. They are graduating disproportionate percentage of students, 52% of African Americans in agricultural sciences. And so the outcomes are tremendous. One of the points that was made earlier is that there are persistent gaps, and we know that. So these institutions, although small in number and underfunded, they are doing a better job than all other classes of colleges and universities in closing the educational gap, closing the economic gap, closing the wealth gap, closing the health gap, and closing the justice gap. They're able to do that, by and large, by the money that is in Title III-F, the only mandatory money in the program. And we heard eloquently from our student from Virginia Union about what's happening on her campus as a result of these dollars. It's happening all around America. We also have 13% of African Americans or blacks that are serving at the helm of the nation's multinational corporations coming from HBCUs, by and large, because of Title III-F money. Title III has been reauthorized and reappropriated for 12 years with bipartisan support. You heard that it was passed in the House with bipartisan support, and indeed it has bipartisan support in the Senate. Senator Tim Scott from the state of South Carolina is co-chairing the bill with Senator Doug Jones, who happens to represent Alabama, that has more HBCUs in its state than anywhere else. We have to bring this bill up if it is allowed to come to the floor. We believe that we have the votes and that we will continue the bipartisan and bicameral support for this vitally important measure. We hope, we pray, we urge that the Senate not allow this bill to cause our 7 million students to be fatalities to the political skirmishes of today. Please bring this bill up now by unanimous consent and vote for support of the Future Act. Thank you so very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Patrice Satine, and I serve as the Director of Congressional and Federal Relations for the American Indian Higher Education Consortium, in short, AHEC. We are the organization that represents tribal colleges, and today we have 37 tribal colleges operating 75 sites in 16 different states. We are very concerned with the lack of funding at this point. Some of the facts that we've been discussing are that 42% of American Indian and Alaska Natives are 24 years or younger. 54% of American Indians and Alaska Natives live in rural areas. And our tribal colleges are the premier institutions that are serving on tribal lands. We know that the investment in tribal colleges goes far and great. 74% of tribal college alumni are currently employed in areas of American Indian communities, tribal lands, or employed directly by their tribal governments. We know that tribal colleges are serving in these areas, and we need the funding to be passed and continued now. We have a quote here from our president of our board, AHEC. This is from President Yarlett, and he said, "As tribal colleges, we are deeply concerned. We need Congress to swiftly pass this bill for us to reassure our students and community members that courses and services are available in this coming fall." In closing, we just want to say that until the Future Act is passed, we are going to continue to jeopardize student completion and student success in our tribal lands. Thank you.
Good morning, buenos días. My name is Alicia Diaz, and I represent HACU, the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities, and all 523 HSIs. I have a message from our president, Dr. Antonio Flores, that I would like to share with you, if you allow me. But first, I'd like to say thank you, as it has been said, to Senator Jones for his leadership, and to all the senators, not only those who were here a few minutes ago, but to all the senators who have been supportive of the passage of the Future Act. From Dr. Flores. For the past decade, Title III Part F of the Higher Education Act has played a vital role in enhancing the STEM pipeline at Hispanic-serving institutions and expanding institutional capacity at HBCUs, at HBCUs, predominantly Black institutions, tribal colleges and universities, and Asian American and Native American Pacific Islander serving institutions. For instance, HSIs account for 15% of institutions of higher education, yet produce 40% of STEM bachelor's degrees earned by Hispanic students. As the nation becomes increasingly diverse, and the number of our institutions continues to grow, federal funding for these schools is more important than ever to ensure that we prepare today's students for tomorrow's jobs. I know the word future is in the bill's name, but it should never have been in the timeline for passage of this bill. So I urge everyone, the time to pass the Future Act is now. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon to everyone. My name is Rodriguez Murray. I'm Senior Vice President for Public Policy and Government Affairs at the United Negro College Fund, UNCF. I'm also a happy graduate of one of the institutions that is a recipient of Title III Part F funds. I'm a Morehouse College graduate, and I'm so happy to be joined by my other HBCU colleagues, especially a current student at Virginia Union University and the president of Bowie State. I want to thank Senator Jones and all senators on a bipartisan basis who have gotten the Future Act to the point that it is now. But as everyone has said, the time to pass the Future Act is now. What has happened on HBCU campuses as a result of Title III Part F funds? HBCUs comprise 9% of all four-year institutions. They enroll 24% of all Black undergrads. They award 26% of the bachelor's degrees earned by African American students, but they award 32% of the STEM degrees earned by African Americans. 32%. That's because of the last decade plus of Title III Part F funds. We put those statistics at risk with the actions or the inactions of the Senate. And if you want to know how important this is, we've mentioned certain senators that are holding this up. Let's look at the state of Tennessee. American Baptist College, Fisk University, Lane College, Lemoyne-Owen. When you put those HBCUs together, they have $2.345 million at stake from Tennessee. There are schools in Tennessee that are at risk right now. We must move swiftly to make sure the schools and the students impacted by Title III Part F receive this funding. And UNCF has been joined by others. We've begun a first-of-its-kind digital campaign to help make that happen. You can go to uncf.org/protectingourfuture, and many have already done that. I stand here representing the 65,000 letters that have come to the Senate in the last 2 months asking the Senate to move the Future Act. 65,000 letters have moved, and yet there are senators still with their ears plugged by their hands. We must move the Future Act on behalf of the constituents writing every day, on behalf of the students like Jalen that are impacted, on behalf of the schools that have done so much to move this country forward. Let's move the Future Act now. Thank you.
Good job. Good job.